All right, everyone, welcome into the monthly Endgame Syndicate Roundtable brought to you guys by EndgameSyndicate.com. Run the Sims, Davis Maddock, your court jester, Dan, Nerdy Tenor, Brian Hooper, Adam Scherer. Utica is going to be with us here in ever so slightly, ever so soon. He'll be here. But this is our weekly, not weekly. Let's not get crazy. We're gonna do a monthly roundtable show where we answer your questions about daily fantasy sports. And honestly, I would assume most people are actually really starting to think about DFS right now. They're like, all right, man, I got to get my projections. I got to get my Sims. I got to get my whatever it might be this year. I got to be thinking about it. And I had Chad Candles in my Discord ask a really good question that honestly, I have no idea how you guys do this. But the sim process for MME stuff, I think is either pretty straightforward or so involved that you don't really want to talk about it in front of the paywall. But I have a question for both you, Adam, and you, Dan. But like, let's say you are playing some single entry and some 3-max stuff. Like, the DraftKings has pretty good single entry and 3-max contests. So what is it like? You have this big batch of lineups. We're filtering by EV. Like, what are you guys doing to weigh down into single entry 3-max stuff and weight those EVs, particularly with like the smaller field sizes?
Well, for me, most of the difference honestly comes down to payout structure and ownership. I don't. I more think of it in the other direction. Like you have like single entry, and then you have massively multi-entry, and
Right.
like when you add a ton of lineups, then that's when I'm starting to think, hey, maybe I need to do some things to make sure I'm spread out. But if you're just playing one or two or three, you don't. You generally, it's pretty easy to avoid diversification pitfalls, right? So
Right.
putting that to the side, I think it's really just like understanding how ownership gets warped in these single entry contests, because the conventional wisdom is, a lot of people entering these play them too conservatively, because they might only be playing one entry. And as a result, the chalky players get chalkier than they should be. So that's especially for NFL, which has, the highest percentage of people who aren't really trying that hard. You would imagine this effect would probably be exacerbated during NFL specifically, where just not doing one of the top 5 most obvious things is something you need to be sure you're thinking about. I don't know. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, pretty much the same boat for me. Like, to me, the most difficult part, or most like, I don't know, the part that like I have spent the most time on lately and struggle with the most, and is kind of starting to get solved by the industry, including us, but is like the portfolio diversification stuff for MME. So like for single entry 3-max, I found that just like a lot easier to solve that big problem, where, doing it like the min uniques way, or, just finding some sort of balance between simulated ROI and uniques works pretty well for 3 lineups. It's when you start getting into lineup 120 and comparing it to lineup like 8 and trying to figure out how all that works. So pretty similar to you. I think it's obviously you don't want to, if you're playing a 3-max, you don't want to be going in with like just your 3 highest ROI lineups, because there's a really good chance that those are like 3 very, very similar lineups. But once you get beyond that, it's really just adjusting to the payout structure, the field size. You don't probably need to be as far off the board in the smaller field stuff as you do in the large field stuff usually, and adjusting for ownership, like you said, which we are seeing that kind of start to happen in large field stuff too, with people using Sims more. You're getting the chalk pieces just being chalkier in general, but adjusting for that, making sure that you're the inputs that you're using are still reflecting what you're actually trying to play against is I guess a really big piece of it. Not just taking so much of the publicly available stuff is catered toward the flagship contests, and if you're just taking that and copying it over, you will probably make some mistakes. So I think it's really just adjusting for payout structure, field size, ownership for those contests is probably like the, I guess, most difficult part or most important part.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a luxury if you're just playing 3. Like, just take 3 different ideas, boom,
right.
and find ones that sim out well for those.
right?
And I mean, like in football, you don't have the negative correlation component as much as you do other sports, but that's something that I see a lot in my stuff for small field stuff in like baseball or MMA also is like, not that I'm forcing it, but a lot of times the 3 lineups I end up playing end up coming out where it's like, oh, okay, well, I have, this volatile pitcher in 2 of them and I'm stacking against him in the 3rd one because it just makes a lot of sense to do it that way, but you don't really get that in NFL as much.
Yeah, I've been also thinking there's like this meta layer to NFL DFS this season, and I think it will become a trend once we get a couple slates under. But I am thinking that, and you guys might already have thoughts on this already, which is that ownerships are going to trend towards being more efficient in the flagship stuff than they've even been. Like, I think we are going to get multiple iterations of the third chalk actually being the second chalk. Like I'm just going to make up names at running back here, but like let's say 2 Jaguars running backs are out and Byshell Tootin in like I don't know, they're 3-point road dogs to team Y, and Byshell Tootin is projected at 33% ownership on runthesims.com, but he actually ends up being closer to like 45%. And the most common combinatorial thing in the whole pool is Bijan Robinson and Byshell Tootin. I do think there is going this is my guess, is that there is going to be a leveling effect this year because 1, more people are using sim products than ever, but 2, also on all the shows everyone listens to, right? Whatever your show of choice, ETR, Roto Grinders, whatever, more people are aware of this idea of just playing the good plays. Whereas, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, it was, oh, you can't play the Bengals defense in this spot because they're way overowned. So I'm just curious your guys' thoughts on that.
I'll add a third point to that, which kind of it goes along with point number 1, and we sort of seen this over the last couple of years in general, but I agree that it's going to just keep going this way, at least until this part changes. The third thing is that as this happens more and more, industry ownership becomes worse and worse if sites aren't adjusting to the sim. The new basically way people play DFS. And so you kind of get this like compounding effect where, like you said, people are using sims more. So they're playing the quote unquote best plays more, but then also they're inputting into their sims these ownership projections that say, in your example, Tootin is 30% when he's going to be 50, but you're telling the sim he's 30. So the sim is just jamming him in at 80.
Jamming him even harder.
Yeah. So it's like kind of like a feedback loop that we've seen in every sport recently and over the last couple of seasons, but I think it just gets worse and worse, or more drastic, I guess, not necessarily good or bad, but more drastic probably this year.
Yeah, the more people that use tools to leverage ownership, the more volatile ownership should become, right? Because of the phenomenon you described. Like, you just imagine the guy is just way underowned. The more people that take advantage of that fact it's just gonna whipsaw the actual ownership in the other direction, right? It's almost paradoxical. Like, if a guy is projected to be 10% owned and he should be 30, like, he might, if enough people are pushing that hard, he might come in at 60, if you push it to the limit. Like, if that appears to be the biggest ownership edge available, like, it will actually make the most off ownerships, vacillate wildly from pool to pool. So it's going to be interesting. I think it just necessarily has to get harder over time to do ownership. The more efficient the field becomes, because if there is an inefficiency, now you're trying to predict as much as the first order inefficiency. You have to predict how much people are going to play against that inefficiency, right? So you have all these like second and third order effects you're trying to predict. So
is that happening in baseball already? Like, I've barely been playing baseball.
That sounds fun. That sounds all good to me, though.
Yeah. Why is that?
If
you think you're better at doing ownership?
If we're just having the actual sim wars now, it's hard for them to get a leg up on the other functional sims.
Yeah, it's true. If you're using sims naively, you're going to get yourself into some bad spot. Like, if there are enough people just doing the obvious thing with a sim product, it's just a different version of what used to happen 5 years ago about people playing all the same things. It would just be for a different reason, right? So it will be interesting to see. I still think for NFL, especially what most people play numerically, the fields are so large, and there's so many people who don't pay attention that I would expect the effects to not be especially strong in those. But I would see it more in things where it's like a few thousand entries or a higher dollar amount. Then
That is true. The higher stakes might become a little cannibalizing.
Yeah.
Because those are
like the what's the luxury box, or even like the 555 or whatever on a given week. I mean, I expect that to some degree it will be a little bit more computer versus computer, whose ownership projections are better. A lot of dupes. You think there'll be, even in NFL, you think there'll be dupe lineups?
Like 555 and luxury showdown, definitely.
Oh, in showdown, yeah, it's gonna be big dupe fest.
And then in the main, it would just be a little bit, obviously lesser extent, more choices, but dupes and ideas, but not dupes and execution. So maybe swapping becomes more valuable. Trying to get to the anti-fragile version, or like the more contrarian version of the best sim team, like going like wide receiver 3 or something instead of like wide receiver 1 tight end, might be good.
Yeah, that's pretty. I mean, showdown is kind of like its own separate beast, because you would have to assume a huge portion of the field now is probably using a sim product for showdown, regardless of, I mean, even like the freaking dime time on DraftKings, people are probably, and now I'm not saying the sim product that they're going to be using is going to be the best, or that they have a great idea of how to build inside that, but I would think, like my guess would be, if you run post contest sims, even with your own projections or whatever, that you're gonna see a lower amount of plus EV lineups than ever in NFL Showdown.
Well, and Showdown gets weird. Like, it's an even more drastic effect of what you were talking about too, because not only is it ownership, but then you get, Stochastic or SaberSim or whatever, like the best projected lineups that they are projecting to not be duped much are right. They just get jammed because everybody's playing this lineup that's projected for 2 dupes and projects really well, and now it's duped 100 times. So like, it's not even just the individual player ownership that's going to get steamed or changed or be completely different than is projected. It's the actual lineup combinations.
All right, let me ask a reductive question then about Showdown.
Can I weigh in really quick, Davis?
Yes, of course.
Oh, just like the Sims is kind of like a nebulous term at this point too. It depends.
Yes.
It's garbage in, garbage out.
It's like immigrants. Like you could just say it and you could just mean anything. People use it to vilify whatever they want.
Okay, leaving that comment aside,
that's what people do.
I didn't.
I think people kind of think of it like optimizer products. Is like, yeah, we'll run this. The Fantasy Cruncher's optimizer is not that much better than Roto Grinder's optimizer, right? You put in projections and it spits out almost identical lineups. It's definitely not like that with sim products, and we don't know what they're doing in all their sim. Like us personally, I'm sure they know, or other people know what all the other companies are doing. But like for smaller fields, like you were talking about Wildcat, they're definitely no one's even or very few companies are even providing ownership based on the slate size. So if you could dial in the ownership and then your sim product adjusts for that, like ours does, you're going to get completely different outputs. So like, I'm not sure I even like totally agree that like, everyone's using the same sims, so therefore they're all going to come to the same conclusions and stuff like that. I don't think we're there yet with, I think some of the sim products probably stink. I don't know which ones, but, I don't know.
Well,
I don't
when
think
you say okay,
over,
so
from a sim perspective,
I'm not saying it's over. I guess so. There's a difference between a sim product in terms of like the inputs, right? Like you're saying garbage in, garbage out. My guess would be like for Showdown specifically, a lot of the inputs are going to be pretty similar in terms of the ownership and the projected points. Like what is a delta you're expected to find? Like I know from doing this in the past that I look at Cody Main stuff at ETR. I looked at what Justin was doing at Run the Sims, and I would look at what Rotor Grinders had. And generally speaking, it was kind of hard to find a big disagreement. I mean, when we were doing the golf stuff, we would find pretty big disagreements because golf is like this crazy variant sport. There's all kinds of things you can disagree about, and have a mathematical basis for it. But wouldn't the real difference be in the sim itself?
Like projections and ownership, like you just said, that's more optimizer thinking. Like, well, what's
going
on
what
in
I'm
the
saying.
background? How are they? What do their distributions look like? What does the play-by-play look like? What is the way they're going about evaluating the lineups? Matters an absolute ton, even in Showdown. Like, it's like, yeah, projections are the same in Showdown, they're the same, so therefore it's all the same. It's like, no, but it's still, if they're not doing it properly, you're not going to evaluate the same. So like Showdown, there is so few combinations that it's, I guess, harder to screw up, and there will be a lot of the similar lineups at top, but there's still a lot going on that you, like, maybe you're not, like, not you, just like the royal you, the people out there aren't fully grasping the differences between the sim.
Well, no, I would have no way to begin to evaluate Dan's or Yuta's or whatever, like their programming of the Sims and the quality of their play-by-play data versus like what stochastic or whatever.
Yeah, but if you're going about this like, oh, ETR has a guy at 15 and stochastic has him at 14.5, I guess the Sims are over. I mean, yeah,
right. Yeah, there's no EV left.
A lot more going on than just that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you're.
How are they comparing the distributions of those two players? You know, and then once they do that, how do they build out what their field like? And
so I was going to say that leads to my next question, which is the most non-duped combos, which theoretically should be pretty valuable, are going to be lots of the, third tight ends, Patrick Ricard, Devin Duvernay, like these guys who project for less than 1.5 points, but more than half a point type stuff. And, as a smooth brain, I mean, I have no idea how to start to think about Carson Steele in a Showdown slate, basically.
Well, I think that's a good place where Sims can help you. I think that's a good example. Although, just as a general point, the rarer and more volatile the thing you're trying to model, the harder it is to model accurately. So if you've got a receiver who 3 games in a row do nothing, and then once in a while will catch a touchdown pass for 70 yards, that's very hard to model accurately. But let's just say that you have a reasonable sim for that guy. This is where I think sims are actually really useful, because it's very hard to intuitively grasp, like, what's the cutoff point at the bottom of a Showdown contest? Like, how far down can I really go before I'm just punting my money away? Because getting unique is extremely valuable if your lineup's good enough to actually win, once every 15 years, right? But finding the cutoff for those very rare kinds of lineups is quite difficult, I think, to reason about without some kind of computer-based process. I just think it's very hard to do. At least it would be for me. Whereas if you're doing it by hand and all of the pieces or names, like, I could imagine a process where you think carefully about getting to different combos and you could be more confident that you're plus EV. Plus you can like look at what other people played, and you're like, hey, I had this really good lineup in the flagship Showdown, and it was only duped 4 times, and Udokow had one of them, and Adam had another one. I'm feeling pretty good. But if you're just out there on a limb with your unduped lineup, it's very hard to know whether you played well, I think.
Yeah, the case you're talking about is definitely dictated by the field size and the payout, though.
That's true.
That third string guy. I think if you're in the high stakes, the sim isn't going to like a guy that's 70% to be a 0.
Right.
And it would rather just take some second string or like third string guy who gets a lot of snaps, put that at the captain or something for like a 2% captain, and then jam chalk from there, rather than get to that combo where it's like a 0.5% guy in the flex, and maybe you're duped on it, but it's probably going to show up better ROI on a team that's all 6 guys score points. But if you're in a large field, the guys you're talking, your Ricard at like 2% of the large field is better than Ricard at 0.5% in like a high stakes.
Because the what do you win when you win is lower, and the like you're also more likely to realize your EV in the high stakes 3 max or whatever than you are. Yeah. Like you could be theoretically, I guess, like you could be the greatest player in the world at Showdown and submit nothing but like golden beautiful lineups and still never win the lotto in Showdown.
One other thing that started happening the last couple of years too, though, with those, and it's probably a result again of Sims, like the 2% Patrick Ricard is still duped like a billion times in
because it's with the high projected teams.
Because it's like, yeah, he's 2% owned, but there's only like 4 functional lineups you could put him in, and so you get, I think sometimes like the Sims products kind of like, because he's 2% owned, it models that as like not being duped very often, but really there's only so many ways you can play him, so it ends up being really, really heavily duped when you go to those guys.
Yeah,
it's also too like the Sims, the models are doing this. It's like, well, not really, because if you adjust the sim, it should then recognize that this lineup's going to be in there more frequently, and then the EV would be lower, and then it wouldn't be in your 150 or something like that. I think another important thing with the Patrick Allard is this applies to pretty much every section of lineups you would use in a Showdown. So you might use a lineup that's duped 200 to 150 times or something. It still might be plus EV compared to all the other ones. Yep. But it's like if you give it a dupe number, let's say you got, you say this lineup's going to be duped 10 times, therefore the EV, that's not really true, right? Because it's a distribution around that 10. That sometimes it'll be 3, sometimes it'll be 15, sometimes it'll be like that.
Yeah.
And you're comparing all these different distributions of that number, where if you just say the Patrick Allard's it's gonna be 1 because he's 0.5%. Like actually maybe it's not. Maybe it's like 1 and then 3 sometimes and then 2. Maybe it's like 1.7 or something like that. And that might dramatically that might cut the EV in half, if it's 1.89 or something like that.
We're using the same example, but we're using different people, by the way. Pat Laird is not the same as Pat Ricard. But
it's true. One of them is in a group chat with me and Peter Overzet, and one of them is an AFC North champion with the Baltimore Ravens. Two different people.
Yes, I don't know if that is that you're talking to chat. I knew that. I know who Patrick Allard is. I've watched enough.
Well, Patrick Ricard is a Ravens fullback.
I know, guys.
Who does I think have multiple receiving touchdowns in his career. I want to say he maybe was in a Showdown shipper. Yes, he has 7 receiving touchdowns, including 1 last season. So those who have spent time parsing out the difference in EV between their Charlie Collar and their Patrick Ricard lineups have deep thoughts on the situation.
Yeah, but either way, bottom line is it evaluating that properly, the information you get it, and then if you still have to give it, you still need to feed it the right data. You still need to feed it the best ownership for this for the contest you're entering too.
Right.
So it's way more complicated than an optimizer.
Yeah. So somebody asked about is the easiest way to get unique on a Showdown slate to cap your salary? Alex K14. The answer is it depends on the slate. So it really depends on how many high projected lineups are available at the high end of the salary spend. So some slates, there are tons and tons of viable lineups that spend most or all of their salary, in which case salary isn't really going to help you. The case where using less salary is going to help you is in a slate where you think too many people are still using most or all of their salaries when they're on the toilet making their lineup, and you discover that there's actually some viable stuff a little bit further down. I don't know how effective this is anymore. I haven't done a study on it. Might be interesting to actually look at the numbers, like what were the EVs and how are they correlated to salaries? That might be interesting to do for a show, maybe with you, Brian, because I have a lot of that data. It'd be actually interesting to see. But yeah, sometimes you'll find showdown slates where like there's a high projected lineup. It spent 49.6 and 2 people had it. Like that happens. Like if you had a magic wand, like that's the lineup I would want to be going after. But of course, it's very hard to find those in practice.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
true.
I mean,
go ahead, Adam.
I'll say the issue you run into with that is like, one, I do think that at least to some extent the lineups that save salary are getting duped more because people are just aware of that strategy. But like, yeah, like if you spend 45K, that's the easiest way to get unique, but you're just playing shitty lineups usually too. So like you're still walking that line of having to find like good lineups. Your first priority should be finding good lineups before it's finding lineups that nobody else is playing.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, you said you had a topic you wanted to toss out.
Oh, no, sorry.
All right. Dan lied. I mean, I guess something that is worth discussing is we are 26 days away. No, less now from the start of the NFL season. I would say, and this, I guess, let's go to Yuta first on this one. Because there actually will be a projection edge in week 1 of the NFL, but you have to find it, right? It'll be the worst that NFL projections are going to be. There are going to be roles that people are just guessing, right? Broncos running backs, Packers wide receivers, things like that. How do you approach, like, if we go like NBA's all the way to the left in terms of RSQ for accurate projections, and baseball is all the way to the right. NFL maybe more towards the middle. Like, how are you approaching week 1 of NFL DFS with that, like, the known uncertainty that is involved?
Kind of the same. In NBA, you do minutes. NFL, you're guessing snaps. There's more standard dev on the snaps than the minutes. But you kind of have to think of it binary sometimes. If one guy plays, other guy doesn't really. So a lot of, like, for me, it'd be in the form of like certain rules. If certain guys can't get there together. But aside from that, you know who the one is most of the time. If there's too much uncertainty, well, the slates tend to be big enough where you don't even have to really go there if we're doing like 50-50s, because you don't really gain enough when the 50-50 you perceive is like a 70-30, because there's still like 20 other running backs that might have that floor. But really, it's more beneficial to have those takes and be early to those things on like who your breakout might be and kind of play into those. And like I said, the guessing like depth chart stuff, it's more, I guess, like satisfying for like best ball guys to like be right on those. But you have like this, you're playing with like salaries and projections for specifically week 1, so you don't really have to like, you sort of have to abandon whatever best ball ideal you might have and just look at what's in front of you.
Dan,
especially with like how soft week 1 pricing is in general too. Like,
right.
What was it, 2 years ago? The Kyren Williams year, like he was like 0.5% owned when nobody realized he was actually the Rams starting running back. Like I had a lot of him in best ball. I didn't consider playing him in DFS because I didn't know he was just like running back 1. And so like he had a good game, and obviously if you had him at 0.5% owned, that was good, but it wasn't even as valuable as it would have been in like a later week because pricing was so soft that you could just make good lineups that didn't pay down for a running back.
Dan, as a no baller, as an NO, don't care. Just learned who Bo Nix was when he got drafted by your team. No thoughts on RJ Harvey as of yet. Are like, these guys are all our ones and zeros on the field. Do you do anything different process wise when that the projections you're using are a little bit more volatile than you would normally expect?
Conceptually, yes. In practice, no. So usually what I do for football, so the concept I wanted to throw out there is not original with me, of course, is that, like, generally speaking, when there is a lot of uncertainty and discomfort around certain plays, and this is going to be a lot in week one, people often reach for the comfortable thing too much. So if you'll see clustering and concentration often in the most comfortable plays. So, like, if everybody knows so and so is really going to be on the field a lot, they'll play them a lot, which they should, but they're going to overdo it because they have. If the alternative is a bunch of stuff I'm not really sure about, people will just sort of naturally avoid those spots. So I would be careful not to, like, super concentrate yourself on things that you feel good about, that everybody else is going to feel good about, especially in week one where we just know less, right? So if you know less, you should be less concentrated. Now that sounds like it contradicts what Yuta says, but it doesn't actually. If you're doing something because you have a take, that's different than what I'm talking about. That's if you know a lot about the game and who's playing, and you have lots and lots of takes, you can just accumulate a whole bunch of micro edges that way, playing all those players in different ways and different lineups, and that can be good. But at sort of like a meta diversity level, like ownership level, you have to be careful not to, hit yourself in the face by just concentrating on the things that the kinds of plays you feel the least bad about. I'll put it that way. So that's what I would avoid, especially in week one.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of what you were getting at. But you can kind of compare week one to basketball too. Yuta was talking about the minutes in basketball and stuff, but like you'll get a lot of NBA slates where you have, a player injured and you haven't seen what the team is going to do from a rotational standpoint yet. And everybody's making assumptions, but like the standard deviation in the minutes for the players that may or may not be asked to step up is really big because you haven't seen it happen. And it's one thing, like you were saying, like if you are really confident that like this is actually right because whatever, then like that's one thing. But if you're just looking at it and you're saying, well, this is the best guess and my best guess is the same as everybody else's best guess, but it's still really just me guessing, and this guy's going to be 70% owned because everybody's guessing the same way. Like there's so much volatility in that, that it's different than when you just have the cheap 70% owned guy that everybody knows is starting at point guard and playing 30 minutes. Like knowing kind of the volatility in the inputs relative to ownership can be really important.
That was really helpful comment for me too, because it's just another way of pointing out that you want to avoid highly owned, highly volatile players for the most part. That's just sort of like a meta level fact about DFS, right? So it's another way of saying, like, don't get too concentrated ownership wise when there's uncertainty is higher than normal, right?
It's probably a good point to mention. We have shady advice. He has what do you want to say? Joined the team, I guess, and he has his portfolio tool as an option now on Run the Sims. Davis, as you are aware, and some of that Dan was just talking about will be taken account in a portfolio tool. I think the biggest one was kind of also similar to what Dan was trying to get at earlier, which is one of the huge benefits of a portfolio tool is decannibalizing your lineups best you can, which is combo related, which was what made me think about it with Dan is if you could, which means like lineups that take EV away from each other. So if you feed a portfolio tool with all the sim information and those distributions and how they compare to each other, a good tool will evaluate that, decannibalize your lineups, recognize the risk reward ratio of the player Dan described, and then give you back a low risk set of 150 or whatever your portfolio is. I think we've gotten a lot of questions on portfolio, and so I hope that's a decent explanation for what it does.
Yeah. Hopefully lower your risk, maybe give you a little EV boost too.
Well, that was just me, you, and Shady, Brian. Yuta or Dan, either or Adam, any of you guys have thoughts on the portfolio optimizer, how to best use it? Is it something you've been doing? Like, just do you guys have a portfolio optimizer? I guess we talked a little bit about lineup selection at the beginning, but any general thoughts on the portfolio optimizer?
I'm excited for it just because I trust Shady's process, and I've commented on shows before. Like, I'm not super complimentary about my opponents in general, but I've always thought he does a really good job, like, of diversifying, and I've spent a lot of time like kind of trying to mimic some of the stuff that he does without knowing how he does it. So I'm excited for it for that reason, because I'm someone that, like, I kind of know what I want to do, but I don't have the ability to necessarily build it and do it. And so I'm either, using somebody's black box tool, or I'm just kind of like backdooring my way into getting what I want. And so, like, I've talked in an Endgame video about how I use SaberSim to basically diversify my portfolio the way that I want before they had put in their own tool. And I'm happy with it and it works, but, like, I'm excited to actually have something that I know is specifically designed to do what it's supposed to do, as opposed to me clicking a bunch of buttons in a way that sort of maybe gives me what I'm trying to get.
Yeah, I have the same thought. I think he would be the guy to trust on this exact topic. And if it's anything close to what he executes, then can only be beneficial.
Yeah, we tried to buy it off of him, and let's just say the price point was a little too rich for our blood, so we did this partnership instead, Davis. So he values that tool. He actually wants to charge even more too. So get in now, in case he wants to raise the price, because he picks the price on the tool. So if he wants to raise it, it's his proprietary code.
I think that's reasonable. Do we want to talk a little bit about getting the product ready for the season? Some of the stuff that we are working on, some of the changes for the Sims, how the projections are going to work, any of that stuff. Dan, do you want to talk about some of the work being done on the back end?
Segues into what we were just talking about. So I'm just now in the process of trying to wire up Shady's portfolio stuff with Run the Sims. So we'll be doing that for golf, and then we're hoping to have that a different group is working on that for football, and then once that's done, I want to get back to, I'm working on a research project to try and get better simulated football game data. So that's what I'm focusing on. It is research, so I don't know how good it's going to be. That's why I'm calling it research. But it's a fun project. I'll definitely be able to talk about some of how that works once I've made it further down. We might do a show or two on that as well. I think some people would be interested in that.
For sure, people would be interested.
Yeah. So, just for some background and why I consider it research. So there's two ways in which it's research. The first is, there's always a chance that the technical approach I have mapped out just won't work very well. Although I think it's relatively low probability of that. I think what I'm doing is very likely to work. But there's always a risk that you do something, and this has happened to me many times in fantasy, where you have a part of your process that's quite simplistic, and you're like, oh, I know a better way to do this, and you work, and you create something much better, and then it doesn't actually help. So I think that is possible, that we do this work, the Sims look cooler, and it doesn't actually matter. But we'll have to see. So that's sort of where I'm at.
Davis, should I bring up Run the Sims and just go over briefly what the plan is?
Yes.
So the this is the sim sim product. You go, you select, Showdown or Classic, and then it's got each game broken down, their points scored, pace, rush rate, etc., the market shares for all the players, rushing, receiving, TDs, passing, etc., that you can adjust. So this will be our guess. So in the back end, what's happening is there's player data that we have priors on that we can adjust with our best guesses that will get updated throughout the season as the play-by-play info comes in. That then translates to yards per catch data, stuff like that gets rolled in a player play-by-play simulation on each iteration. The week-by-week market share data we're going to update on Tuesdays, hopefully. It'll be like our first best guess, to get something out there early after Monday Night Football, and all the data will get populated on Tuesday some point. And then through the week, as information comes in and roster information comes in, we'll tighten it up. Yuda's gonna, help us. The whole team's gonna pitch in on, things that look off and trying to dial that in best we can. Then that play-by-play information, you could go in here, and then if you don't like it, you could change anything you want, and it'll do it too. So, like, this is more useful in Showdown, but just an example. Like, you could just say the Panthers, like, if you just want to go, what would have – because it's different than sports betting where you want to predict specifically exactly what will happen and then how you compare to the line. You might want to take a gamble, like in golf, you might take a gamble on, like, the weather's going to be really bad on, the afternoon slate. You might not know that, but you want to gamble it. Well, how can you do that? Well, you'd have to adjust the projections. You could do that with this too. Like, you could say the score is going to be really high in Carolina for some reason, and just the points scored, and say, like, what does the game look like if that happens? And then the system will adjust. That'll populate a play-by-play simulation based on what you tell it. And then you have a whole bunch of settings you could do here with stacks and stuff. But even after you and this, by the way, is going to be updated. This is still last year's front end. It'll look like this, Davis, but there'll be some more bells and whistles, like in golf, where you can normalize ownership and stuff like that to make it easier, where you don't have to make sure everything exactly sums to 100, plus some other front end changes. Like, you'll be able to upload player stats from other sites, and it'll auto-populate for you. And so it will make lineups here. You could download these and use them yourself. You can, and then it makes the play-by-play data. It'll make the amount of lineups you requested, play them against a separate field based on your ownership, and then run the sims on top of that to give you an EV of each lineup you built, depending on the package you got. And then even on this, you can also filter once again based on these lineups. You could then filter down, even more type of rules you want to set. Filter these even more after your first settings guess. So there's a whole bunch of different.
The answer to can you upload custom projections is yes. And how does that interface? I mean, it interfaces the same way with the Sims, correct? The same way that adjusting them manually would?
Yes. Here, there's an optimizer too, if you want to use it, but it's just like a classic optimizer. It doesn't run simulations on it yet. We're thinking about just combining the two products, but currently it was set up like this. And you can upload projections from any source and just use it like an optimizer. But play-by-play sims need more information. So you can't tell a play-by-play sim, Caleb Williams is going to have 16.5 points. Give me the result. You could, I guess, but this is built for more information. So what you would need is the receptions for each player, the amount of passes, the amount of rush attempts. And then that's what this upload will be. So you'll be able to upload it here. There'll be a button like up here, I think. And like you could upload ETR's player stats, and then it'll repopulate this stuff down here.
Do you have a spreadsheet to do this right now? How to populate the custom projections? I mean, it's just uploading a CSV, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just uploading CSV. I'm gonna make a little Excel template, and I'll put it in the Discord eventually. So like it'll be like just copy paste from your provider of here and upload.
Yeah. Simple.
But yeah, it's
simple
just like any other upload, Davis, right? It's any other optimizer upload. There'll be a default template, and you got to change the numbers in the template. You could actually just go in there and manually change the numbers and then re-upload if you don't like what the projections is. And also too, this is pretty cool. On your projections, it'll give you all what your market share and whatever adjustments. It'll give you the actual receiving data and stuff where you could go and then price the props too. There's a pricing props tool on the site. It won't update the actual props package. There's a separate props package that you can buy individually or comes with the sim packages too. You could see that under subscribe. It won't individually update that, but that's also something the site does, where it takes our back end projections and then prices DraftKings, Underdog, etc.
Yeah. And then all that stuff feeds in to the prop sheet as well. I would assume the reason why it's not working is it's not in the right format. If you're trying to upload something to the site right now and it's not working, it's because it is not matching the format. Is
he talking about optimizer? I'm assuming. There's nowhere to upload on this yet except on the optimizer.
Yeah.
This also, I didn't mention this. This will have a shady advice checkbox too if you're subscribed to that, and then you want to optimize your portfolio, and then it'll repopulate here. So like it'll go from play-by-play to our contest sims to shady code back to us, and then populate here. And somehow this is going to hopefully all be happening like what, 10 seconds, Dan? 30 seconds, 40 seconds?
Faster is better.
Faster is better. We're still
working on making something faster right now, so we'll figure it out. Although,
there you
go. It's a little less of an emergency for sports like NFL. You're usually not crunching the very last second, but faster is better.
And the top lineup week 1 is a Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans team. So, just run it back. Christian McCaffrey. Yeah, absolutely love to see it. I mean, we are going to be tweaking right now. The projections that you guys have access to on the front end are a collaborative effort from the team. I run the Sims. You can use them if you want. You can take Stochastic. If you just think that Dan and the guys have the greatest Sims in the world, you can take someone else's numbers and put them in. That works just fine as well. Adam and I are probably going to do a video on my channel running through some of the baseline stuff and how we are arriving there and where we agree with the market or disagree with the market. And then you guys are about to do a members only roundtable, correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go. Members only roundtable coming soon. Unless anyone else has anything else, I think we can probably get out of there.
I wanted you to say more just so we get less. I wish you to talk more comments. The other guys suck.
Well,
like every show.
If you
did the show by himself.
To be fair, that's when you and Nerdy do a show. We don't get those on my shows either.
Well, I'm going to start making.
If people want more Utical, they know where they can get it, which is at endgamesyndicate.com.
That's right.
That's where they can go and get it. They can get that behind the paywall over there. Early Bird is running for the next 8 days. You can get 15% off. Let's say 8 days, Brian. We're gonna turn that off, and we're gonna make people pay
something like
price. That. Yeah. So if you use code EarlyBird, you can get 15% off the NFL specific packages, and we will be back with all of you guys real soon.